So welcome you all to Career in Clinical and Counseling Psychology webinar. Let me introduce you to the panel members straight away. We have with us Sushree and Siddhi. Sushree Sahu is a consulting counseling psychologist at Manas Ganga, Noida. She holds an MSc in mental health studies from King's College, London. He is a research trainee for the cross-fertilized training for new investigators in Egypt and India, which is being offered by University of Pittsburgh, and it's in collaboration with Dr. Ram Manohar Hospital, New Delhi. She works with adolescents and young adults in therapy on psychological and emotional issues ranging from adjustment difficulty to more severe mental illnesses like depression, schizophrenia, and personality disorders. Siddhi, on the other hand, is a mental health professional again, currently pursuing a doctorate in counseling psychology at the University of Manchester, United Kingdom. Prior to this, she completed her MSc in counseling psychology from Christ University, Bangalore. Siddhi's practice is based on building therapeutic alliances and creating a safe and accepting space for her clients. Her experience involves working with children, adolescents, and adults presenting with concerns such as anxiety, depression, self-esteem issues, interpersonal problems, psychosomatic concerns, special needs, and the like. I welcome the both of you. Thank you so much for joining in with us today. Sushree and Siddhi, can you hear me, both of you? For now, you
Yes, you're audible.
perfect. Guys, are you being able to read our minds? Oh, I am sorry. Are you being able to hear us, all of us?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Thank you for introducing us. Thanks a
All
lot,
right.
Bhumika.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
So let's begin with the questions straight away. We have 85 people. You guys seem to gain a lot of popularity because we weren't honestly expecting anything beyond 50, because this was the first time we were reaching out, and we got 135 plus registrations. So Congo on that. All right.
Congratulations to you, Bhumika, for
Thank
doing such a fantastic job.
Thank you. All right. So the first question goes for the both of you. What made you take up psychology in the first place? And students would love to know, what do you guys exactly do? So since we are school students and professionals, so let's try and break it down for them, because what the introduction also that I said also had a lot of technical jargon. So let's try and break it out for them, that what do you exactly do? What made you choose psychology in the first place?
So for myself, I was talking to both Siddhi and Bhumika before we got onto this webinar. And I think we all stumble into psychology. Nobody really plans it because we have very limited understanding of it while we are in school. At least back in our times, we didn't know what it looked like, what the field was offering. So we just stumbled upon it because initially it was interesting. And eventually what happened is, because we became the snob crowd which was taking psychology, everybody who was studying psychology became the hep crowd of the college. So we wanted to be among the prestigious people, so we decided to pursue a subject that was considered very, very intelligent. Only intellectuals pursued a subject like that. So that is how I got into psychology, more with a sense of arrogance. But when we got into the field, I think we got the opportunity to see it more closely. And then when it came to choosing a career, it became more clinically oriented because, like I said, we were the snob crowd. So we wanted to do something that was challenging in our lives. So clinical psychology presented itself as the most challenging branch of psychology. So we thought, okay, why not take up clinical psychology and see what it is to work with patients suffering with emotional and mental disorders. So that is how I entered the field. And I wanted to work very hard because I thought I was a hard working girl. So I thought my hard work should bear some ethics eventually. So it was my work ethic that got me into psychology, and now I'm having a full-time career in it.
And Siddhi, how did you land up in the field of psychology? Would you like to break it down for the students? What do you exactly do?
Absolutely. So it's been a long journey, to be honest, coming here. And for me, honestly, my journey with psychology began with computer science. To be honest, I was the crowd that, okay, let's take up science and let's do computer science. And when I entered that field, realized that I do not like this, I began reading up a lot more. And the word cathartic for me just weaved magic for me into that field. And that's when I decided to switch from my field after my 12th grade and take up psychology in my undergrad. And since then, I think just getting an understanding of what the profession is, what the subject is all about, I think that probably just took me further ahead. Knowing a lot more about what each subject entails then made me go to my counseling psychology career further on. After which I, along with a few, coupled with a few internships, I think I then decided to pursue my MSc in counseling psychology from Christ University, Bangalore. And I think out there, working with adolescents through that course, and even after that, gaining experience working with children and young people as well as adults, getting into the research bit of it, for me, I think it just, the more I was into the field, the more my interest was just expanded a lot more. And I think that's how the journey has been for me so far. And that's when I eventually decided to pursue the doctorate as well.
That's amazing. So, could you please tell me, both of you, what really keeps you going in the field of psychology? Because we know that this field is so much of ups and downs. We'll be discussing all the pros and cons. So, what is it for the two of you that really keeps you going in this field? ऐसा क्या आप लोगों को, what is so interesting about this field for the two of you? So, Siddhi, let's start from you, and then we'll go on to Sushree's answer as well.
Absolutely. So to be honest, as I mentioned, I think the more I got into the field, the more I realized how much I want this to be a part of my life and how much I want to make a career out of this as well. Additionally, I think what keeps me going is, I think, of course, it's come up after out of a hard understanding, but to just remind myself that the struggles that I'm facing, the obstacles that I'm facing are not the field itself. The field is different and the struggles are different for it. So I think to segregate that and to make that differentiation, I know that I am facing these struggles and, these are the hardships, but that's not what the field is. The field is absolutely different from those struggles. So I think making that differentiation has definitely been a turning point for me. And of course, it does sound very preachy, but I think this is what has, kept me going, and to just keep myself constantly reminding that I love the field and the struggles are just a part of it. You're on mute.
That's very beautifully put across, that it's not the psychology as the field, it's the circumstances and situations out there that makes things difficult, but it's not the field in itself. And Sushree, what's your idea on this?
So I think what keeps me really going while you were asking this question, I'm thinking that I'm a very nosy individual. I'm an extremely intrusive person who likes to intrude into people's lives. And I'm someone who likes to listen into stories. I always weave in stories in my head all the time. So for me, what keeps me going is the narratives, actually. People come with various narratives when they enter into therapy. And each narrative is as fascinating as the previous one and the next one that's about to come in through that door. So for me, it's the stories, and I like listening to stories. I'm not a storyteller, but the story listening is extremely fascinating, and that's what keeps me going.
Right. And that's one of the biggest characteristics or traits when you read up the theory of psychology, like you read up psychology books. Active listening is one of the biggest part of, the personality that you're supposed to have, or the skills that you're supposed to have.
It's not so much active listening, Bhumika. It's more of the curiosity. I think the active listening comes as a byproduct of the curiosity that you have in understanding somebody's stories. And I think that curiosity is what keeps one very engaged, because sitting with someone for a 60 or a 40-minute session can be challenging sometimes, unless you have that sense of curiosity.
Yeah. Honestly, I've tried that. Like while I was trying psychotherapy. So I knew that was not my cup of tea after a point of time. But I used to end up getting zoned out. I used to almost yawn. So I've had that weird experiences, and I realized, okay, no, this is not what I'm supposed to take up. So have you ever experienced that, Sushri? Have you ever come through a situation where you're listening to the stories and you're just like all zoned out, and the client is also seeing that? Has that ever happened with you?
I think it happened initially because we weren't used to sitting for 60 minutes in one go. And it was very hard because, you get restless, and then you start wondering what what to say next, because it's all about saying something smart to your client eventually.
Right.
But I realized that that just hampers with my process of being curious. So right now, while the zoning out is still a part of it, the zoning out happens because the client says something and you zone into your own world. So I think
Right.
that's a very interesting dynamic that I share for 2 minutes when I'm 2 seconds. It's not even 2 minutes. I'm not allowed that
Yeah.
opportunity to zone out for 2 minutes. That's too long. But I
Right.
think the 2 second zoning out for me is very powerful, because it just helps me come to a very shared narrative space with the client, that what you're going through, I have had a similar experience that zoned me into my own narrative. So I
I'm sure.
think it's a very powerful way of connecting with another
Yeah.
individual.
Right. Right. Right.
And just to
And
add to that,
yeah. Yeah.
I think therapy is a very human process. So it's not that
Absolutely.
there are going to be no mistakes in it, or that somebody might not zone out, because we're all human beings at the end of the day. So
Hmm.
I think the basic essential criteria here is that even if something like this is happening, it's about discussing it with your client, discussing it in the
Absolutely.
process of therapy with your client, and getting this to the notice that okay, this is something that's happening for us, and maybe we can look more into it and figure out why this is happening and whether this is conducive to how we're going to work further on. So I think it's also about just allowing the process to be very human and just
Right.
letting it take its flow.
Right, right, right. That's amazing and insight. And Sushri, I have this another question from you since you're continuing. Since you have major experience in both clinical and counseling field, could you please give us the major differences? Because a lot of students out there, I'm sure, does get a lot confused about these two fields. So could you put in examples to sort of help us understand क्या major differences in दोनों fields में?
Right. So, clinical and counseling are actually overlapping fields. So, when you enter the profession, you've got to have a good hold over both the subject matters. Actually, you can't be doing both these things as mutually exclusive. So, clinical, like the name suggests, is more with respect to understanding the psychopathology. It's more scientific with respect to understanding the diagnosis of the other person. What are the clinical disorders that we study in the DSM-5 or in the ICD-10, trying to have an accurate diagnosis, or more or less an accurate diagnosis of whether the person has a clinical case of depression, whether it's a clinical case of anxiety, is it schizophrenia, is it, maybe just death and bereavement that one is suffering from. So clinical basically is something that requires you to equip yourself with diagnostic skills, right? It's also about the assessment process. There are assessments that need to be conducted as part of your clinical work, where you're taking a detailed history about the person, you're taking a detailed understanding of the family of the individual, their past disorders, their current understanding of their illnesses, and conducting some inventories in terms of, let's see, what is your anxiety score in the last 2 weeks? What is your depression score in the last 2 weeks? Based on your score, are you suffering from depression, or is it just a normal sadness that anybody can
Right,
experience?
right.
um, Counseling actually comes as a part of it, when you have an understanding of the disorder and you engage in a process which is more intervention oriented. So
Hmm.
अगर आपने किसी को diagnosis दे दिया, आपका काम वहीं पे खत्म नहीं होता, because the challenge is how is it that you can help the person get better.
Hmm. Hmm.
So counseling is basically a more intervention oriented process,
Hmm.
where you're trying to help the person understand ways of overcoming their depression, overcoming their illnesses. Having
Hmm.
said that, counseling is not only for people with a clinical disorder, right?
Right, right.
Anybody and everybody can seek counseling.
Yeah.
It is more about experiencing some life event that has happened to you. You are not somebody who has a clinical diagnosis of depression, but you can be normally sad after a breakup,
Makes
right?
sense. Makes sense.
And you can have a bad marriage, or you're having a tough time in your marriage, and
Hmm.
you seek therapy because you're stressed out, or you're
Hmm.
having troubles with your boss at work
Hmm.
and you seek
Hmm.
therapy to de-stress yourself. So
Hmm.
counseling is more about trying to understand, why is it that I behave the way I do,
Hmm.
and is there a way that I can change my behavior? Is there a way I can change my perceptions about the situation around? Is there
Hmm.
a way I can change my thought process? So
Hmm.
counseling is a more long term process. It's more
Yeah.
intensive, it's more engaging. the goal of counseling, to put it in a nutshell, is to try and attempt a personality change of the individual so that
Right.
they start behaving a little differently to normal stimuli around them.
Right. And that also makes me think that, how a lot of people still out there have a lot of stigma revolving around mental health. So you always sort of give this term and say, अरे पागल है, हम क्यों जाएंगे थेरेपिस्ट के पास, या हम क्यों जाएंगे काउंसलर के पास, हमें क्या जरूरत है थेरेपी की. बट इट्स नॉट दैट वे. आई कैन हैव if I'm someone who's not probably happy with my way of dealing at work, I can still go to the counselor or a therapist. If I feel that probably my self-esteem, my confidence levels are low, doesn't mean that I'm mad and I need to go. Yeah, so there are certain stigmas in the society. I'd also have a question after I ask one question to Siddhi revolving around that whole stigma, that how much has it come down. I'll come back to you. So Siddhi, I also have a question for you here. A lot of students have been asking, in fact, this question: what are the range of career options in clinical and counseling psychology? What are the different setups where professionals can work?
Right. I think that's a very common question which a lot of people have, and I think a lot of people who are already in the field for multiple years also have that question. So I think one of the perks of being in the field is that the field is open to various setups. You're not limited to maybe a hospital setting, or you're not limited to a school setting. When you see that, okay, this is what I've picked up. If you've picked up counseling psychology as a specialization eventually, your avenues are multiple. You can be in the corporate setup, you can be in a school setting, educational settings, you can be in the private sector, you can be working in hospitals, you can work in collaboration with multidisciplinary teams as well. So a lot of times, even when you're working as a counseling psychologist, there are times that you will have to work with the team. For example, in my previous experience, I have worked with a multidisciplinary team where there were remedial educators, where there were speech therapists. So, even probably working in a setup like that is also very conducive to the kind of work that you will eventually do.
Right.
So I think it's quite open. I think it's also about identifying what is the niche that you'd like to get into, whether it would be an educational setting for you that you'd want to venture into. That is also very crucial in identifying how and where you'd want to go further on. Does that answer the question? Have I missed out anything that you asked?
That's pretty much it. And feel that students should know that schools, hospitals, NGOs, it's so many setups wherein you can go ahead and practice these careers, irrespective of whichever background you are from. But if you are coming from a field of psychology, even today, a lot of students have been asking, can I become a lawyer eventually? Yes. Can I go in social services? 100% yes. So there's ample fields that you can still get into after these fields, after pursuing the course. And Sushree, the next question goes for you. Since you have 6 years of experience in the field, do you think that people have become more upfront about mental health services in India, or is there still a lot of stigma around? And please also give us a comparative study between how it was previously and how it is now.
Well, the stigma remains, but I think we don't have to be so pessimistic. People are becoming more and more forthcoming, especially when celebrities start talking about their difficulties, and when there are, campaigns which are advocated by celebrities. So people start to become more and more accepting of the situation. But large sections of the society do still have the stigma attached. And I think when we talk about mental illness, we are eventually battling two battles. One is how to cure somebody, and the other is how to cure the stigma attached to it. So the stigma still remains, and it's unfortunate, but that is how it is. But of course, the situation is not so grim. Since the last 2 years, people are becoming more forthcoming, and I think the counseling services in schools, fortunately, have become more proactive. So it allows for early intervention before things get out of hand. I think the school starts to intervene, and things kind of start to look better. So I think as counseling services in school, definitely schools have become very, very good.
Right. Definitely. And since both of you have connections with Bombay and even Delhi, so Shri, you have connections with Delhi. You've worked in Delhi so far. Siddhi, you've worked in Bombay. So I feel that it has, and we've also had an association with Bangalore. So I feel that it has really picked up in the big cities, definitely. But I'm sure in smaller cities, the scope is yet to come in. What is your view on that? Have you ever experienced that bit of it?
It's hard to tell for me. It's a little
Yeah.
hard to tell because we haven't
Mhm.
really had the opportunity to work in smaller places. But
Right.
like I tell you, I work in a government hospital also.
Right.
So sometimes I feel people from a lower socioeconomic status, they're more accepting of the illness because that's kind of playing havoc in their families. So they are
Oh.
more okay to seek help and get the cure. People from a higher socioeconomic status, they are more concerned with their prestige and their image eventually. But when mental illness is really playing havoc in your life, when the one person who's earning the bread and butter for the family has a mental illness and is unable to go to work,
Yeah.
the people from that strata of society are extremely keen on getting help, and they're very compliant with their treatment.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, unfortunately enough, that's mental health. In fact, even with Corona, people have been behaving in like they're taking it up like a social stigma. So I've seen people not really talking about it. They're behaving in a manner, if you talk about it, you will get Corona. So imagine something as simple as a physical illness, which has just recently come up. There's so much social stigma revolving around it. So I can certainly say that mental health illness will take its own time, but I'm sure we've come a long way.
That's right.
Okay.
We have.
Siddhi, you have next question. So you again revolving on this pretty similar line, since you have brief exposure of UK now, and I'm sure you must have gotten to meet a lot of people in the UK, people who are practicing this profession. So what is your view on how things are in India and how things are in UK?
Right. To be honest, I think it'd be really unfair to compare in that
Hmm.
sense because, of course, mental health in the UK is quite advanced and it's been here for a long time and it's a part of their daily lives. People are much more accepting than we would anticipate there in India. So
Yeah.
I think, of course, but of course, there are absolutely great things that we can learn
Hmm.
and incorporate in our country as well. Whereas I know that, of course, now the courses that are coming up for psychology in India are much more, but
Yeah.
when it comes to things like ethics or professional bodies that regulate the profession and things like that are still missing in our country, which I think is a long way to go. It is definitely coming up. It is still in the process, but I think that is something which is a long way apart.
Right.
But here, when I see that people are more accepting, it's a part of their daily lives. Okay, it's a weekly thing for them that I have to go to for my personal therapy this week, or on this particular day. It is also a very regular part of each and every educational institute over here. Every school that you go to, every university that you're a part of. Um, and if you go to your GP as well, your general physician, they have referrals if you ever need things like that. There's a lot of help available that you need. Of course, it has its pitfalls as well, but I think we're slowly catching up. Our dialogue around mental health is definitely changed over the past years, and I think because of the sort of media that we're exposed to, because of the sort of research that is coming up in
Yeah.
the field. And I think India is
Yeah.
definitely catching up, and I think we're definitely doing a lot better than we were doing a few years
Right,
ago.
right. And I think as you also both rightly pointed out that how not just media, even celebrities, because they do certainly have certain social impact on the society, like what they say really holds value. So somebody like Deepika Padukone and recently even Alia Bhatt's sister had really come up with how they faced battled with depression. Deepika Padukone, for that matter, has also opened her own. She's come up with her own NGO also. So I'm sure like people are coming out with this, and it will definitely with time get better. But anyway, Siddhi, like, would anyway point out why India is, if it is lacking behind from, let's say, UK? What would be the major difference be?
I think this is a very elaborate conversation, and the nuances are a
Right.
lot more. But what I do
Okay.
believe is that the culture that we stem from, I think when you look at everything before mental health, we Indians still adhere to a lot of traditional healing practices, and
Yeah.
we have a really different faith system than what is being practiced in the UK. So I
Mm-hmm.
think because of how individuals in the country in India have a very different faith or a very different belief system, I think that is something which will take a while to just overcome that, because I mean,
Mm.
because of how religion is practiced in the country, or because of alternate healers are looked up in the country,
Mm.
जैसे कि कोई पंडित हो गए, कोई बाबा हो गए, things like that. I
Mm.
think because
Mm.
of that,
Mm.
the difference is really really vast, and I think
Right.
it took. I'd honestly not be doing justice to our country as well if I just put it in one line, to be honest. But I
Right,
think
right.
there are a lot of small differences that do come up in things like that, you know. But
Mm,
of course, the conversation is changing again, and you know, people
mm,
are open to even trying this once they've figured out that okay, probably the alternative healing practice is not
yeah.
working out for them in this case.
Mm-hmm. And that made me share something with Sushree and Siddhi the other day, and we were just generally talking about the myths that we come across in the society. So somebody got me asking कि आप क्या पढ़े हो? So I told them that I've also studied psychology, and the person immediately said, "Okay, can you please check for me if this guy is right for me?" I've said, "No, I'm not a pandit. I'm a psychologist." So still, like people also have a lot of wrong connotations about what we exactly do. And again, this question comes for the both of you. Uh, the psychology as a subject is so intriguing. A lot of people just do end up taking psychology just because it's so interesting a subject, right? However, and even like applying concepts of psychology is also again very interesting. However, there are times that the subject can get to us, that the practice can probably get to us. So, would you be able to tell as practitioners, as academicians, to the students that when they get into this profession, how should they cope up with all this?
Right. So I think there are one of the few major important things over here to remind yourself is when you're in the field is your own personal therapy. Because I
Hmm.
think a lot of people have the notion that, oh, you're a psychologist, you know everything and your life is perfect, you know, which is
Hmm.
absolutely not the case. And I think since we're flawed human beings as well, I think your own personal therapy is critical. Additionally, I think supervision, I think this is one element which is always forgotten and taken for granted in India, wherein individuals believe that you do not require supervision for your practice that you're doing. But I think if you are a practitioner, supervision is one of the most important things that you have to adhere to, so that even if you are dealing with a client, or if you're with a client which and it's got hard for you, you can take it back to your own supervision, discuss it with your supervisor that this is the trouble I'm facing in my work and things like that, right? So I think these are the two most important things that I believe are definitely needed when you're practicing in the field.
Right, right, right. Makes sense. Makes sense. And that's very important to point that you yourself should be attending therapy sessions. Yes, none of us can be perfect. We are all human beings at the end of the day, and we can't say that we can be 100% perfect. However, we still need to keep processing ourselves because, yes, there can be times when field can be heavy for us. What's your take on that, Sushree?
That's right. I agree with Siddhi. There has to be a regular supervision. You do some sort of supervision on a weekly basis where you meet with peers and you discuss yours. More than discussing your cases, you probably talk about how you have felt and how a particular client has made you feel. Sometimes there are challenges that hit you very hard,
Hmm.
and it's a good idea to talk about your feelings with either your supervisor or amongst your peer supervisees.
Right,
So peer supervision, that's how technically the field regulates itself. That's a
right.
more internal mechanism.
Hmm.
Apart from that, I think one part of the job is not to take your job too seriously. I feel there has to be some detachment that you've got to practice, otherwise things can
Hmm.
get to you.
Right.
Because unless you keep some boundaries, you know, that this is an individual who's suffering.
Hmm.
I empathize with the individual. I cannot let that suffering spill into my boundaries.
Yes,
So don't
yes.
take your work way too seriously. Enjoy your work, but nothing has to be so serious that it takes a toll on you.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating field. It's enjoying. It's very very interesting. But enjoy your work and don't take it too seriously. And
And
I
on,
think what a lot of sorry to cut you
mm,
there, a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of therapists try very hard to fix the client, and I think they are very unrealistic expectations that one has of themselves.
Hmm.
You can try your best, you can try really hard, but don't be so harsh on your skills or on yourselves. You know, you can't always fix everything that's broken. Not to say that our people are broken, but you only try to put things together.
Right,
It
right.
reminds me of a very old psychology
Hmm.
joke that how many psychologists does it take to switch a light bulb, to fix a light bulb? And the answer to it is that the question is whether the light bulb wants to be fixed.
Oh,
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think this is something
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
definitely
yeah,
have to
yeah.
remember while you're in the field.
Makes sense, makes sense. And could you please, you pointed out one very good thing that this you need to detach. So could you please tell me what's the difference between empathy and sympathy? For students out there, they need to understand that there's a very major difference between empathy. So if you could probably give an example where you know that that's where empathy was coming in, that's where sympathy was coming in, and tell us what is the difference between the two, plus why is it important to know the difference?
That's right. So, look, everybody knows the textbook definition, okay? We
Hmm.
just don't know it when we are experiencing these. So, sympathy would be like, oh, somebody is getting hurt and I'm almost feeling that pain. That I feel like, oh, I have to get off my chair and band aid that person, right?
Hmm.
So it's like किसी के आंसू आ गए तो आपको ऐसा लगता है immediately do something to make them stop crying. That is
Right.
what a person who's operating from sympathy does, right?
Hmm.
And that's something which is what we are not trained to do. We are trained to be empathetic. So if someone is crying in front of me, the least and the most I will do is pass on that tissue to them, let them relax, let them get themselves back to a place where they can start talking. If I am jumping off my chair to really do something so that they stop crying and tell them that please don't cry, you look so much better when you're happy and smiling, that is sympathy. But empathy would allow you to be like, okay, I can understand you're crying, and I can even encourage that you're crying. I can only pass on the tissue to you.
Right, right. And would you like to give? So we have a lot of students out there, be it from school, be it from college. What are certain skills that they should 100% develop in order to progress in this field, in order to become a successful psychologist, counselor, therapist? So what are certain skill sets that you would definitely recommend?
Oh, I think you've got to be curious. Every client has a
Yeah.
story, and you've got to be curious. And some research, fascinating research on who are the most effective therapists, will tell you that the most effective therapists are those who are surprised by their clients, as compared to someone who's not very effective. You
Yeah.
know, because if you're curious, there's some element to their narrative that you haven't yet tapped in, and then there's a surprise.
Yeah.
Effective therapists show a lot of surprise in their
Right.
practice, which maybe somebody who's less effective would not show.
Right.
So I think curiosity and just being engaged with your client, they are the two most important
Hmm.
personality traits of a therapist. They are not skills.
Right, right. And since these students are right now just in their colleges or in schools, so I'm sure they must have not gotten really opportunity to interact with the clients. So what is it that they should do at the school level in order to build up their profiles? Siddhi, would you like to answer that question? Do you think that just the textbooks really, just the qualification or the textbooks would make the difference? You getting into the top college would make any difference? How do you think that it works?
To be honest, I think, as Sushree mentioned, the quality of being curious and being inquisitive begins early on. So I think having that desire to just keep learning, even when you're in school, you could be in your ninth grade, your 12th grade, or your, final year in undergrad. I think just having the curiosity to learn more, to read more, to know what's happening in the field, I think that is what keeps you going. And, I mean, because the field has grown to a larger extent now, there are a lot of available internships that are available, a lot of training courses that are available that you could do while you're in college as well. I think so. This is extremely important when you're in school as well. So you don't really need to know what it is to be like a client that there, because of course you don't have the qualification for it. But if you're actually just reading up, learning more, speaking to professionals in the field, connecting with your professors, because they are somebody who can always connect you to further trainers or further internships in the field. I think that is really important to even get started in the field, because getting a first hand knowledge about what the field is like is really important in this field, because it's important to unmask the field, because psychology is really glamorized as a field. So I think it's really important to just know what the field looks like before you actually venture into further education
Right.
or further specialization.
I totally agree with that point. It's so while you're in school, while you're in college, yes, we're reading up on psychology books, but to be honest, we're not really understanding that what is out there in the industry, how the clients are to be dealt with. That theory, yes, will be working, but unless you get that practical exposure via internships, via trainings, via probably listening to different workshops, attending conferences, it will, and networking is also very important in itself, because unless you have networking, it becomes very hard for you to probably progress in the field. there are certain things that none of the colleges will be teaching you. These are certain skills, like something as brand management, something as how do you put across your resume, what or do you need to add in your resume. These are certain very, very important elements that you should be looking at the same time. And for that, I would like to tell you that Sushree offers proper internship programs and trainings. So, Sushree, would you please like to let all the students know, because we do have a lot of school and college students both pursuing psychology. So, what is the kind of training are you really offering, and who all can come for that?
So
No
before I
problem.
get to your answer on internship, I think
Mm,
I'd like to add to what you were saying before that, which
mm,
is textbooks are only half the story, you know,
100%.
and there is so much training that one needs to constantly undergo to reinvent themselves.
Right.
And let me also tell the students that investing in your training
Mm,
requires you to invest monetarily. So it's a lot of investment monetarily, and you need to keep doing that. ऐसा नहीं है कि आपके पास degree आ गई, so you stop investing or you've gotten
mm,
everything that you need to know. So it's a constant process of training which requires money, which requires time, which requires effort, and it is until you stop being a therapist. So it's an ongoing process. So never quit that if you're a therapist. Your
right.
books will never prepare you for the real world challenges.
That's very true. Very true. And
Right. About the
so,
internship.
yeah, about the internship and of
Yeah.
course the training program that you offer. So who all can attend? I'm sure a lot of students out there would be very much willing to know that.
Right. So we try to offer the internship in a very hands-on manner. So
Mm,
we try to give them as much exposure to therapeutic practices, actually,
right.
because fortunately I work with a team which each one of the members has a different
Mm,
theoretical orientation. Somebody is
mm,
a CBT therapist, somebody practices with a psychoanalysis
mm,
background. So
mm,
I think my team gives a very interesting mixture, and I encourage my interns to sit in on every therapy session that they can, so that they
mm,
understand the process of therapy. So I think the training requires therapists to allow interns to sit in on the cases, of course, with prior permission of the patient
mm.
or the
Very
client.
important. Mm,
But I think what one has to do as part of their training is not to do much. आप notebook लेके लिखिए मत. Just listen to the patient. Just listen
yeah.
to their narratives. Just watch them. That is what training is all about, and
Mm,
that's the kind of training we encourage. We
right.
ask them never to come in with a notebook. That's not what we encourage.
Yeah, it's very important because unless you observe, there's so many symptoms that you don't get to know unless you observe. There's so many like this.
Cues. There are so many
So
non-verbal
many cues.
cues, and
Exactly, exactly. So that observation in itself is a very beautiful process of the whole internship thingy. That's amazing. So who all can attend? So Shri, if people out there would want to reach out to you, who do you think should be reaching out to you in the first place for that?
so, in terms of my setup, unfortunately, we do a lot of hardcore clinical work. So, we
Mm,
encourage only students with a background in psychology after they have completed, say, a year of psychology training at college, matlab first year BA, or while they are training. Because
mm,
I feel sometimes a student who's just out of 12th standard is a
right.
little uninitiated,
Makes
even
sense.
theoretically. So
Mm,
they get very scared. We've tried that with some 12th standard students, and they
okay.
get very
Mm,
scared when somebody is having an epileptic episode. They get so scared that they don't know what to do, and for
right.
us to manage that challenge becomes very tough.
Right.
So we
Right.
usually encourage somebody who's in their first year onwards to start
Right.
training with us.
Right, right. We'll take last few questions because we have a lot of chats coming in. So then we'll shift to the questions that students have been asking. So she tell me, this is one very common question that we all have come across. How does the monetization works in this field? A lot of people are worried about that. So what is your take on that? What do you think? How things have been rolling in that manner?
Initially, it pays peanuts, like Siddhi
Mm,
and you would both agree. There is very
mm,
little money,
mm,
very little as compared to how much you might have invested in your training. And
mm,
that can be a little discouraging to therapists or to psychologists when they start out.
right,
And like you said, it's a glamorized field. When you enter,
mm,
you're disillusioned, and many people want to quit because there is absolutely no money coming in
mm,
initially. But
mm,
if you have the resilience and the ability to hang in for maybe 2 years, and you're
mm,
able to persist, then
mm,
I think you become more skilled. You become more confident with your ability to be with the patient or with the client, and then the confidence is what starts to yield a lot of results monetarily. But for
Right.
the first 2 years, I think one has to invest and expect returns in terms of learning, क्योंकि
हम्म.
आपकी बुक्स आपको तैयार नहीं करती है.
बिल्कुल
ठीक है, so if
बिल्कुल.
you can spend your first or the second year just watching, just trying, that is a lot of learning and a lot of investment, but the money will come in later, not so immediately. So don't expect money.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I've just got a question. How about someone associated with corporate sector just started studying about psychology? Would it be a good idea to start off with the session? Okay, I didn't get it. All right. So I know of this student. So she's been into corporate sector and she's really willing to get into psychology. She could not, like, as we were discussing, because of the whole Indian education system, we just end up in a random course. We end up in a random career. So how does she come back? How does she really start understanding the field? Where should she really start from? If degrees is not the way out, let's say masters is still an option, so where should she really start from?
I think because it is a switch from an absolutely contrasting field in terms
Yeah.
of like coming from the corporate sector and then
Hmm.
heading to a field which is a helping profession. I think the basics is to start from the basic itself,
Right.
getting yourself acquainted with everything that is out there, probably
Hmm.
doing a small course, getting to know what is there, maybe
Hmm.
getting a hang of whether you really want to do this or not as well, because you're coming from a very different setup. So I think just getting to know the field first is really important, and there are multiple ways you can do this. Start off by reading textbooks, and start off by reading all the literature that is out there. Don't, of course, open yourself with that. Once you know that this is definitely meant for you, I think there are multiple ways wherein you can enter a master's. Certain
Right.
masters do have a criteria that you need to have at least
Yeah.
half an undergrad degree in psychology, your minor subjects, if not a full majors. So I
Hmm.
think just learning to identify that as well, probably, But I think the most important thing here would be to know that, okay, this is something that I really want to do, because you're making such a huge contrast switch.
Right.
So
Right.
definitely possible, but I think it would require a lot of time and effort from your end to invest yourself into the field, to
Right.
delve deeper into the field, and know that whether this is something whether I want to go ahead with or not.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And Avi, as you asked this question, I would also want to point out taking sessions immediately will not be a possibility and is not a good idea. Working on your skills and then start taking sessions. I mean, of course, working on your skills, reading up on a lot, taking internships, then under supervision, start taking sessions makes much more sense. One more thing that I really wanted to ask, let's say if I'm not coming from a background where I have a financial support system and I have to take care of my family in terms of finances, I am like, it's technically the finances are on me. In that case, what would you suggest that if the student is entering into the niche field like psychology, what should he or she do? It's a very basic question that comes in. And of course, just because initially we're not earning, a lot of people do end up try to, get away from the field, irrespective of the fact that they're really good at it, like they're meant for the field. So how do you think we should work on this bit?
For starters, I think it is very well known fact that psychology as a profession is very inaccessible to a major part of the population because of how it is placed in terms of finances. So I
Mm.
think a lot of the population gets limited out there itself. But I think one other thing to keep in mind is that when you are pursuing psychology, it's not only therapy or practice that you can get into. You can get into teaching. So you can teach psychology in a school, you can teach psychology in a college or at the university level after completing your necessary qualifications, giving the necessary exams, which do pay well for starters. And a lot of people I know, a lot of my own professors, in fact, they did this juggling between teaching and practicing as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that your practice is still there, it's still ongoing, but then you also have a steady source of income if you're the breadwinner of the family.
Mm.
Probably, delving into some sort of research project as well, because research also does pay. So I think it's very crucial to identify and know that you're not limited only to practice, and there are multiple ways you can have a steady source of income while still also continuing practice.
Right, right. So, Shri, I remember immediately when Siddhi said research because you're also a part of this amazing research. So, what would you also say on this bit? How do you think we should balance it out in the beginning, or even maybe for later?
Right. So, first things first, if money is your priority, you would want to go into a more secure job, like Siddhi was pointing out, in terms of academics, in terms of teaching, or even organizational psychology, because
Mm.
HR pays well. You
Yeah.
want to consider those areas of psychology. So, it's not like everything is peanuts.
Mm.
If your priority is to make money out of something that you're interested in, there are ways to pursue both money and interest.
Mm.
Um, in terms of research, I think I had a very classic case of entering into research only because I was one of those people who wanted to make some living going. So it
Mm.
was an additional source of income. That's how I got into research, because it was paying
Mm.
some money, some
Mm.
steady source of income. So
Mm.
that was my primary goal. And
Mm.
also because I was trying some PhD ideas. So that was secondary. Money was more primary.
Right, right. That's amazing. Thank you for putting it up so upfront. And as both of them said that yes, it's not just practice that you should be focusing on when you're getting into the field of psychology. You should be focusing on teaching. You should consider taking UGC NET if you're in India. You should definitely consider research. So there's so many other avenues via which training and development is again an amazing avenue. Getting into supervision is again an amazing avenue. So there's so many other ways that you can still end up earning in this field. All right, now we'll quickly switch to the questions. A lot of questions have been coming in. So all right, this the list is not ending. What are the possible job opportunities right after a postgraduate degree in clinical psychology? And can we practice as a CBT therapist even without MPhil clinical psychology degree?
Well, you can practice as long as you have a CBT certification, which can be a part of a course that you have done while you were pursuing your master's. There are short courses that allow you to train yourselves as CBT therapists.
Hmm.
So you're more than welcome to practice. I think what I would like to, I know I'm getting into your niche, Bhumika, but I see a lot of questions popping up. I think Siddhi can also supplement
Yeah.
answers there regarding whether one should pursue psychology abroad or in India. I
Yeah,
think
that's
these
very
questions are
important
popping
question.
up too much. So
Hmm.
I think I'd like to start off with saying that no matter where you pursue, it's about the skills you eventually pick up. You
Hmm.
can pursue here or abroad, doesn't matter, as long as you're sure that you are constantly training on becoming good therapists or becoming good psychologists. So your place of education maybe plays very little role as compared to your curiosity to learn more.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. And since both of you have studied from UK, even Siddhi, you are pursuing your studies from UK right now. So, as Sushree also very rightly said, that it's what you're learning in the process is what really matters. What is your take on that, Siddhi?
I think absolutely I am in agreement with Sushree over here that your place or the course, whether be it in the US, be it in the UK or Canada that you're doing from, I think, of course, it does hold relevant because you cannot ignore cultural influences that play a part in psychology as well. So, I mean, obviously, there will be a lot of cultural differences that pop up when you're practicing in the UK, which I am currently also,
I'm
going
sure.
through and
I'm sure.
looking at all the differences. So, I think,
Mm-hmm.
of course, when you account for all those differences, eventually it is about the sort of training that you get, and as long as you're mindful of the individual's um, socio-cultural aspect, socio-economic background, while working with your clients, I think eventually it is your skills. But of course, whether you do it from here or there, it's obviously helpful to just keep in mind that there will be a lot of background differences in your clients that you have over here and in your clients that you have in India.
Right. For this, I'd like to add for all of you out there that please also be sort of certainly sure where are you really willing to settle. Because honestly speaking, if you are planning to settle down in India in long term, it's very important that you at least do your graduation degree from India, because understanding the cultural context, how people are working, what are the problems that this culture is really facing is very important for you to understand, because it's a field where you're connecting one on one with people. And
Yeah.
yes, of course, then probably pursue a master's overseas. However, if you plan plan that no, I want to settle overseas, then as Siddhi mentioned rightly, that it's important for you to understand कि यूके में कल्चर कैसा है, यूके के लोग कैसे, क्योंकि जब तक आपको कल्चर लोग नहीं समझ में आएंगे, लैंग्वेज नहीं समझ में आएगा, इट्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट फॉर यू टू गेट ऑन वन लेवल एंड really make an impact. So then you can consider Australia, then you can consider Canada. But yes, if you're planning to start from India, I mean, if you're planning to do practice in India for the longest term, start from India, then definitely go for your masters if you wish to. If you still plan to continue it from India, that's still again fine.
Bhumika, I'd like to
Just to
pitch
add
in there
that,
a little bit.
yeah,
Sorry,
yes,
Siddhi
go
was going
ahead,
to
go
say
ahead.
Yes, please
something.
You
Okay.
know, I'll pitch in after you're done.
Right, thanks. So I think let's also burst the bubble. Let's also understand that practicing abroad, there's a lot of there are a lot of things that one has to prepare for, right? Because if
Oh,
you're planning to study abroad, you've got to
yeah,
keep your finances in check,
a
right?
lot.
It's not very easy to fund a course which requires you to study psychology in the UK, in the US, in Australia, or Canada. They are expensive courses. And let's also be honest that these countries are developed countries and
Mm,
they have a very saturated field of psychology. There are professionals already. So for
definitely.
you to expect a job there might be a little unrealistic. So
Hmm.
let's be a little clear on that because ऐसी countries जैसे जहाँ development already हो चुकी है and they give a lot of priority to mental
Hmm.
health any which way. So
Hmm.
somewhere the field is a bit saturated there. So it may
Hmm.
not be so easy for you to switch into a career opportunity when you are abroad. And
Especially UK, I believe. Especially like
UK
even if
and the
you,
US.
yeah,
US makes it a little harder these days.
yes, yeah.
Canada is probably a little more friendly.
Canada is flexible, yeah.
Australia is also starting to become a little challenging with
Yeah,
respect to immigrants. So let's be
exactly.
honest that if you're practicing clinical psychology or counseling psychology, the fields are already saturated with the native people,
Mm,
right?
mm,
But
mm,
unless you're
mm,
doing something really offbeat, like ABA, which is applied behavioral analysis for autism, there are
mm.
opportunities because these fields are still popping up, you know. So
Right,
if you
right,
are getting into those kind of specializations, of course, going abroad, settling abroad, making money there is very fancy. It's a possibility.
right, right. Siddhi, what's your take on that?
Just to add to that, two things. Okay. Firstly, I do know of people who've done their education abroad. I mean, of course, when financials are all in place and have come back and are doing pretty well for themselves in the Indian context as well. So that is still a possibility. Of course, keeping in mind all the financial factors that are there. Additionally, I think about if even about the immigration bit, even before that, to practice in these countries, the qualifications that are required are quite high. So I know a lot of states in the US, but because it differs according to states in the
Right.
US, you do need to have a PhD to practice as a licensed counseling psychologist or a
Yeah,
licensed clinical psychologist.
yeah.
So I think it is essential to even know that it's not that you can just complete your masters in the US and get a license to practice. There are a lot of hours that you need to complete. There are a lot of exams that you need to give, and that's when you get the license from the state board
Exactly,
to practice.
exactly.
So I think it is important to be mindful of all these things as well, that what sort of licensing criteria are there in each of these countries and whether they are open to just practicing with a master or whether it would be required of you to do a PhD.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah.
even keeping that in mind is really important.
Yeah, and it's not, as both of you mentioned, it's not just saturated, it's also very stringent. Unlike in India right now, like in India we aren't too particular about licenses, we aren't too particular about things should
Right.
happen this way, but outside it's 100% that you should have licenses. And yes, until now Canada and Australia were still open, but even Australia has started to become very challenging right now. So
Yeah, and
yes,
also let's remember there's investment in terms of the number of
oh,
years you put in,
yeah.
right? Psychology is not only about chalo masters ho gaya to we can practice, you know. If you're really looking for a licensure, it requires you to put in at least 6 years of hard work with a PhD degree. And 6 years is actually not ideal because 7 years is what people take in the US to complete a degree and then sit for the licensing exam. So it's
Right.
not that easy. It requires you to work hard and be persistent.
Right, right. Totally agree with all the points that both of you mentioned. We have another question. As professionals, how difficult it is to deal with the patients, or first of all, we call them clients who come with some self-diagnosed issues due to lack of
Oh,
awareness.
okay. Okay, I understand. So Google is what they are looking at in order to
Mhm.
understand
Yeah.
what's happening in their lives. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think we get a
Oh,
lot of
right.
We get a lot of people like that, and they are allowed to be called patients depending on what your background is. So
Okay.
we are
That's
flexible with clients
mm,
and patients.
mm,
So when it comes to people who think that there's something off with them because they have Googled their symptoms, I think awareness is what you spend your first session doing. You
yeah.
sit them down, psychoeducate them, spend a lot of time trying to help them understand what's going on. And if they feel that there is genuinely something wrong, you can investigate through assessment process and
Mm-hmm.
through more clinically oriented processes, but spend some time psychoeducating the individual.
Right, right. Makes sense. And what are some good colleges to pursue masters in clinical and counseling psychology? Any quick answers? We have TIS, we have Christ, we have DU, we have Jamia, we have very good college, Ambedkar. Any colleges that you would like to add, Sushree and Siddhi?
I think you've pretty much mentioned quite a few
Hmm.
of them.
Right.
There's Mumbai University if somebody's from Mumbai. Um,
Yeah.
Quite a few
Sorry.
colleges in Mumbai. There's Mumbai University if somebody's
Mumbai
from Mumbai.
University. Yes. SNTT Bombay is also really good.
There's SNDT, there's Mithibai, quite a
Yeah.
few.
Right. Can counselors take up workplace training and assessments in some aspects, or is it just limited to the field of OB? That's a good question. I think that can be answered on 10th May because we have a proper session on OB and HR. However, yes, we can also take up a lot of trainings that way. Would you like to add, have any one of you ever tried taking trainings and gone into assessments?
Yeah, so it works, but OB therapists and OB psychologists are trained. But when we are looking at more clinical cases, if you're trying to test for, say, depression or anxiety in the organizational employees, then of
Mhm.
course the clinical psychologist also steps in. So usually when it comes to these things, we work in collaboration with the HR, with the OB psychologists.
Right, right.
Right. And just to add to that, and there was a really good suggestion in the chat here, like where they mentioned that psychometrics is also a part of psychology. So you could
Mm.
also get into the whole psychometric field after you've done your master's or your MSc, which of course again connects to your assessments or your outcome measures that you will
Right,
be using. So that
right.
also can be in.
Can one practice clinical psychology after doing an MPhil but having an MSc in counseling psychology? And is qualifying UGC net mandatory to take up MPhil?
No, that's not mandatory. As long as you have an MPhil degree and as long as you apply for the RCI license, which is the Rehabilitation Council of India license, you're good to go.
Yeah.
It doesn't
If,
matter आपके पास MA psychology है, MSc psychology है. It doesn't
hmm.
matter as long as you crack the qualifying exam for an MPhil to get into an MPhil course.
If you have graduated a master's degree in counseling psychology from India, is it possible to pursue your career as a counselor abroad? No, as we answered, that there are a lot of stringent processes that you're supposed to get through. Or should we start from scratch to get license? It really depends what the country is really asking for. So I'm sure you would not need to start from the scratch, but I'm sure there's certain sort of qualification that they're asking in the licensing procedure. Am I right? Is there anything that you'd like to add in this bit?
No, that's apt, I think.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Sarvangi. Psychometrics is definitely one of an amazing avenues that one can explore. In fact, Sarvangi, we know her from Bangalore Christ. Three of us have studied there. And after Christ, Sarvangi had straight away ventured into metal. She went into psychometric assessment. So that's definitely one amazing field after counseling psychology. How does an MA degree is different from MSc? Again, you reach out to me for this. Honestly speaking, there's not much difference. There's very minimal difference, especially in India, in terms of curriculum. Yes, what college are you making it to would make some difference or the other. In terms of research and practice in Indian psychology, how much importance should be given to religion and philosophy, since these subjects play a vital role in most of the Indian population? Let's take up this last question and then we'll sort of move towards ending the session.
That's a very elaborate question. I was hoping you could skip it.
Okay, but as I said, it's more of a cultural context that you should be taking into consideration what the client is really looking for. So that's also one thing that really matters. Siddhi, any quick answer on this bit?
Right. I think so. A very quick and very short, brief answer would be that there is a lot of faith-based counseling also that happens uh, uh, differently across religions. In fact, I recently attended a faith-based counseling webinar, which is widely available, and I can give that link. I can share the link with you if you'd like to have access to that. But of course, it is vital to know what your specialization is in. If you see that a client has come to you seeking specially that, okay, I need some sort of help regard to this, and you know that that is not your expertise, then you wouldn't venture into that, okay, because it wouldn't be fair to just give out half-hearted service to them. So I think it would also be helpful to know in your network who does practice faith-based counseling, and I'm sure it's quite prevalent in India because of how we are so adhering to alternative practices. So I think it would be helpful to know who does this practice and whether you'd like to venture into that or if you'd like to refer your clients to somebody else.
Right, right. And one last question that somebody is asking about forensic psychology again and again. And somebody in morning also asked me whether there's some scope with psychology and law, then that's where forensic psychology is really coming into the picture. So, yes, because the field exists. So, and there is one very good college of forensic science in Gujarat, Gandhinagar. So, do
Right.
look at their courses, do understand what they're really teaching you. So, and if you're willing to go get into this, try that you do your masters from that college in that case.
Thanks for having us, Bhumika. I think
Yeah.
it was great to be on here and just address all the students and pick up their queries. So thanks for having us.
Thank you for being there. Any last message for the students out there or the young budding professionals out there?
It's not as hard as it looks.
Yeah, thank you. And Sushree, anything from your end?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having both Siddhi and I. And I think the only thing I would like to tell the students is just enjoy the subject. It's a very fascinating subject and keep working at it.
Right, 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 right.